Ferrari just dropped evidence that could flip the entire Formula One season. Not rumors, not theories, actual proof that Mercedes may be gaining up to 40 extra horsepower exactly when the FIA isn't measuring. That's not innovation. That's a hidden advantage that can decide races by tenths and championships by points. And here's what makes this insane. The FIA already inspected the engine multiple times and still declared it completely legal. So how do you beat a car that becomes faster during the race but looks perfectly legal in the garage? Ferrari says they've finally exposed the answer. And if they're right, then everything we've watched so far this season was built on something no one else could match. Subscribe now, because what Ferrari just revealed puts Mercedes under pressure like never before. Ferrari didn't rush this. They couldn't, because what they're dealing with isn't something obvious. It's something designed to stay hidden. And that's exactly why it took time. Because at first, nothing looked illegal. Nothing looked out of place. The Mercedes engine passed every test, every inspection, every verification the FIA performed. 16-to-1 compression. Exactly the limit. Exactly what the rules allow. But on track, it told a different story. And that's where Ferrari started to feel it. Not see it, feel it. Because drivers notice things data doesn't immediately explain. The way a car pulls out of a corner. The way it keeps accelerating longer than expected. The way it just doesn't stop gaining. And Ferrari drivers reported the same thing again and again. The Mercedes wasn't just faster. It was stronger later. Deeper into the straight. Further into the lap. And that kind of behavior doesn't come from setup. It comes from something structural. Something built into the engine itself. So Ferrari changed approach. They stopped asking how much faster Mercedes was, and started asking when that extra performance appears. Because that's where secrets hide. Not in peak numbers. In timing. In transitions. In the exact moment performance changes. And once they focused on that, everything began to shift. Because the pattern became clear. The advantage wasn't constant. It grew, lap after lap, as temperatures increased, as the engine moved away from controlled conditions and into real operating heat. And that's when Ferrari realized something critical. They weren't chasing a faster engine. They were chasing a changing engine. And that difference is everything, because a normal engine delivers fixed performance, predictable, stable, but this one didn't. This one evolved. And that's where the connection finally appeared. Because Ferrari already knew something about thermal expansion. They knew that as materials heat up, they change, they expand, they alter internal dimensions. And in an engine, that changes everything. Combustion, pressure, efficiency, power. So they went deeper. They analyzed how those materials behave at different temperatures. How small changes in volume could affect compression. And what they found was the missing piece. Because if you design an engine with extremely precise tolerances when it's cold, you can control how it transforms when it gets hot. You can predict it. You can engineer it. And that's exactly what Ferrari now believes Mercedes did. At low temperatures, everything is perfect. 16-to-1, fully legal. But as the engine reaches real operating conditions, around 130 degrees in structure, far higher inside the combustion chamber, the materials expand in a very specific way. Not randomly, not naturally, precisely. And that expansion reduces the combustion chamber volume, increasing compression, not by accident, by design. And suddenly, that same engine that passed every FIA test is no longer operating at 16. It's operating closer to 18. And that's where everything changes. Because that jump in compression is worth real performance. 30 to 40 horsepower. Directly. No tricks. No software. Pure mechanical gain. And in Formula One, that's massive. That's the difference between fighting and controlling, between defending and disappearing. And now, Ferrari isn't just suggesting this. They're connecting it to what we see on track. The late race pace, the consistent pull on straights, the ability to extend gaps without pushing harder. It all aligns. But here's where the situation becomes impossible to ignore. Because once you understand this, you also understand something much bigger. Mercedes didn't break the rules. They built around the part the rules didn't cover. They exploited the gap between measurement and reality. And that's why this is so difficult to stop. Because technically, everything is still legal. But competitively, it changes everything. And now Ferrari has made that gap visible. Which means one thing. The pressure is no longer internal. It's everywhere. In the paddock. In the FIA. In every team meeting across the grid. Because once something like this is exposed, every team has to respond, and every regulator has to act, which leads to the moment that now defines everything. June, because that's when the rules change. That's when engines must behave the same, in testing and on track, cold and hot. And when that moment comes, there will be no more hiding, no more interpretation. Just one question: when reality is finally measured, will Mercedes still be this far ahead? But here's where everything shifts from discovery to consequence. Because once Ferrari connected the theory to the behavior, they realized something much bigger. This isn't just about how Mercedes gains performance. It's about when that performance decides races. And that's the part nobody can ignore anymore. Because when Ferrari went back through the first races, they didn't just see speed. They saw timing. Moments where the gap suddenly appears. Moments where Mercedes doesn't just pull away. They break the race open. And those moments always happen under the same conditions. High temperature, high load, full race intensity. Exactly where this engine is designed to operate at its peak. Australia, China, Japan. The pattern is identical. The gap doesn't explode at the start. It builds, slowly, then suddenly it's gone. And once it's gone, it never comes back. That's not normal. That's controlled performance. And that's what makes Ferrari's evidence so powerful. Because it doesn't just explain how the engine works. It explains when it wins. But here's where this becomes even more uncomfortable. Because Ferrari didn't stop at the engine. They kept digging. And what they found next might be even more important. Energy. Because once you increase compression, you don't just gain power. You gain efficiency. More complete combustion. More usable energy. And that energy doesn't disappear. It feeds the hybrid system, the MGUK. And this is where the gap becomes even harder to close. Because data from the races shows something very clear. Mercedes isn't just faster in raw power. They are harvesting more energy per lap, around 7.2 megajoules, compared to Ferrari at 6.4, and Red Bull even lower. That difference might sound small, but it changes everything. Because more harvested energy means more deployment. More deployment means more sustained speed. Not just one burst. Continuous advantage. And that's exactly what we see on track. Mercedes doesn't just overtake. They extend. They maintain. They control. Lap after lap. And now, everything starts to connect. The compression increase. Feeds combustion efficiency. That efficiency feeds energy recovery. That energy feeds deployment. And that deployment feeds lap time. This isn't one trick. It's a chain reaction. A complete system where every gain amplifies the next. And that's why Ferrari's new evidence is so dangerous. Because it shows this isn't a loophole. It's a philosophy. A way of building performance that adapts to real conditions instead of being limited by static rules. And that's much harder to stop. Because you can ban a component. You can rewrite a rule. But stopping a concept, that's something else entirely. And this is exactly the situation the FIA is now facing. Because they're not just regulating an engine. They're trying to regulate behavior. Something that changes. Something that evolves. Something that only reveals itself when it's already too late. And that's why June matters more than anything. Because for the first time, reality becomes the test. Engines will be measured at real operating temperatures, around 130 degrees. The same conditions where this entire advantage exists. And when that happens, there are no more variables. No more interpretation. Only truth. If Mercedes loses performance, Ferrari was right. If they don't, then this story goes deeper than anyone expected. Because that would mean the compression advantage is only part of the system. And that's the thought that's now spreading across the paddock. Quietly, but powerfully. Because every team is asking the same question. What if Ferrari didn't expose the whole secret? What if they only exposed the part we can see? Because if that's true, then Mercedes isn't just ahead. They're operating on a level the others haven't even reached yet. And that's the real danger. Not what Ferrari has revealed, but what might still be hidden. And now we arrive at the part nobody inside Formula One wants to say out loud. Because if everything Ferrari has shown is true, then Mercedes isn't just ahead. They're operating with a head start that can't be measured in tenths anymore. It's measured in time, development time, understanding, control. Because think about what this really means. Mercedes didn't just find a way to gain power. They built an engine that behaves differently depending on the moment. An engine that gives more exactly when the race demands it. And that kind of control changes everything. because Formula One has always been about maximizing performance. But this is about timing performance, deciding when to be faster. And that's a completely different level of dominance, because if you can choose when your advantage appears, you don't just react to the race. You control it, you dictate it, you shape it. And that's exactly what Ferrari is now starting to understand. Because when they reanalyzed the races with this in mind, they saw something even more unsettling. Mercedes isn't pushing all the time. They don't need to. They hold back. They manage. They wait. And then when the moment comes, they release everything. And the gap appears instantly. Not gradually, not naturally, but decisively. And once it appears, the race is over. That's not just speed. That's control over outcome. And that's what makes this so difficult to fight. Because how do you defend against something that doesn't show itself until it's too late? But here's where the situation becomes even more critical. Because Ferrari now faces a problem they didn't expect. Understanding the system doesn't mean you can replicate it. Because this isn't just about copying a concept. It's about rebuilding an entire philosophy. Materials, thermal behavior, energy integration, precision engineering at a microscopic level. And that takes time. A lot of time. Time Ferrari doesn't have. Because the season is already moving. Points are already being lost. Gaps are already being created. And every race before June feels like racing against something incomplete. Something not fully regulated. Something not fully visible. And that creates frustration. Real frustration. Because Ferrari knows, even if they are right, even if everything they've exposed is true, they still have to live with it. At least for now. And inside Mercedes, they know that too.